Hey, welcome to the Big Me Kickoff. I am your host, Kevin Noon. It is Tuesday, November 23rd. It is the week of the game. And I know people can't be any more excited about the upcoming game between Ohio State and that team up north. We'll have so much more on this here on Buckeye Scoop, on all of our great podcasts, all of our great content. I'm not going to get into the matchup too much at this point. We will have a guest later this week who covers the Wolverines, who knows a lot about the Wolverines. So don't worry, there will be a second edition of Big Me Kickoff this week as we get closer to the game. And that game is on as 12 o'clock on Saturday on Fox. Big Fox, as we say, which means your normal Fox broadcasting channel, not one of the alternates, none of that. The channel that you see The Simpsons and Gordon Ramsay and all those dumb singing shows. That's the channel that you'll find the game on, as usual. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about the weekend that was in Ohio State coming off of a 56-7 win over Michigan State. And I've had a lot of people come up and talk to me since that game and say, Kevin, is that what this team is? Was that just a perfect storm? What can we expect moving forward? And I think that's a really good question because I don't know if Ohio State can play a better half of football than it played in the first half against the Spartans. I don't know if Ohio State can repeat that. Certainly, Ohio State's not going to face a pass defense as woeful as Michigan State's. And I'm not going to buy into this, well, they were 130th out of 130 teams. Yes, in terms of yards allowed. But yards allowed isn't always the best indicator. And their passing efficiency and yards per attempt against, and there's all these other stats that can be thrown in there. And then there's a lot of advanced metrics that Tom Orr on our channel is big into the advanced metrics. My friends, the college football nerds, big on the advanced metrics. Stuff that I kind of steer clear of, not because I don't want, it's not an infringement on infringing on what they talk about. I don't really understand all of those numbers. 25 years ago, I would have been all about learning all of that, following it. Was born a little too early for the sabermetrics in baseball and the advanced stats in college football. Despite my failing vision, I like the eye test as much as anything, and that's kind of who I am and where I am. But we'll talk about Ohio State's quarterback, C.J. Stroud. He was named Big Ten Freshman of the Week and Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week. That should not come as a surprise to anybody coming off of 32 of 35 for 432, 6 touchdowns, all 6 touchdowns in the first half of the game. What could Stroud have gone for if Ryan Day decided that he just wanted to unleash the Death Star for 4 quarters? I don't think we can just sit there and double his numbers. I mean, at halftime, he was still shy of 400, but he had 6 touchdowns. There are the people who believe in just the doubling and saying, well, if you just double it, he would have been close to 800 yards, 12 touchdowns. I'm not sure I'm going to buy into that. But if they would have kept passing and kept Stroud in there, which there's absolutely no reason to do. This game was over at 21-0. And I'd even argue to say 14-0, but we'll say 21-0. Could Stroud have thrown for another 300 yards? Probably. He could have probably gotten to 700 yards in this game. Could he have gotten to 10 touchdowns? 11 touchdowns? 12 touchdowns? I don't know. At some point you do have to worry. You can sit there and play the hypothetical, but I'm going to play the hypothetical card that Michigan State would have gotten really pissed off and probably been diving for people's knees. And that's not saying that Michigan State is a chippy, dirty team. That's just saying anybody that would be subjected to that, their pride would be hurt at some point and they would get angry. Most of us played high school sports of one sort or another. I know I had a crappy attitude back in my day. If somebody's showing me up, I probably would have taken a little revenge. And again, I'm not advocating any of that. I'm just speaking in real terms. But, if we play this game in a vacuum, which it's not, and it's just Ohio State going against Michigan State, none of these other peripheries, none of these other variables being factored into it, he could have, honestly, as on as he was, we're looking, just again, if we double the numbers, He was 32 of 35. Granted, he did play one series in the second half, so it's not exactly that you could say, well, then it would be 64 of 70. If we're playing that, it would be closer to 60 of I don't have his halftime numbers here, but 60 of 64, something like that. Again, 700 yards. It just goes to show how on he was and how good the Ohio State offense is, which leads me to my next point, the Heisman Trophy. CJ Stroud is now a betting favorite, according to multiple books out there. I've seen him at minus 220. It's getting there. It's getting there. He's going to go to New York, in my opinion. He's going to get a lot of first place votes. I mean, until somebody else does something to take it away from him, I don't know how you don't vote for him. I mean, I know Bryce Young threw for even more yardage. Bryce Young had to play the whole game against Arkansas. But there's a narrative out there now. And the narrative is CJ Stroud, the reason his numbers are so good is because he has such great weapons around him. Poor Bryce Young at this little upstart program named Alabama. He doesn't have as many weapons, so it's not fair. It isn't fair that Bryce Young doesn't have the same number of weapons around him that CJ Stroud does, so therefore Bryce Young is having a better season, if you listen to some people. I mean, he only has Jamison Williams to throw it to. Boo-hoo. What? I mean, just come on. Come on now. Nobody was taking anything away from Joe Burrow and the NFL roster of receivers that he had, with an NFL coordinator, truthfully, in Joe Brady. I mean, yes, Joe Burrow probably deserved extra credit because of the Cajun Cookie Monster, Ed Orgeron, being the head coach of that team. I've not been shy in saying that I don't think that Ed Orgeron really is an elite coach. He has a natty. That's true. You cannot take that away from him. That is 100% true. He's got a big buyout. He is, he's doing a lot better in his life than I am in mine. So hats off to Ed O. But he's not an elite coach. LSU won a national title because of Joe Burrow and Joe Brady, not because of Ed Orgeron. So what are your thoughts about this narrative that is out there now for CJ Stroud and being, I don't know if undeserving is there, but maybe he has to be viewed at in a more critical lens because he's just got Olave and Wilson and Smith and Jigba and Henderson and Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson calling plays, and Matt Corral at Ole Miss and Bryce Young at Alabama. They don't necessarily have that. I mean, trust me, if we were going to sit there and put it on somebody because they are severely limited in what's around them, then all hail Matt Corral. Matt Corral is having to throw to walk-ons in some points because that receiver room is depleted in Oxford, Mississippi. I will never, ever, under this current iteration of Alabama, ever give Alabama the benefit of the doubt for not being talented enough. That's ridiculous. And then the other narrative out there is, well, with no definitive front runner, maybe this is the year that we look at a defensive player. And the two best defensive players in the nation right now happen to be in the SEC. One's at Alabama, one's at UGA. Will Anderson and that Nakobe Dean. And I'm hearing that narrative by a network that has a vested financial interest in the SEC. So there's no reason to give credit to CJ Stroud, who is having a Heisman-worthy season, but he has too much talent around him. If we can't sit there and say that this needs to be Bryce Young at Alabama, an SEC member last time I checked, maybe this needs to be the year that we just blow it all up and give it to a defensive player And the two that jump off the page happen to be in the SEC. Let me adjust my tinfoil hat here for a minute. Hopefully it doesn't dig into my bald head, but that seems like a load of hooey to me. I would vote for CJ Stroud, for one. I'm not sure I would vote for Bryce Young, too. I would probably be motivated for a defensive player because I do think that the Heisman has lost its way in terms of what it is. It's really become a quarterback award. So how is it really different than some of the other quarterback awards out there? It's not. I mean, sometimes we will see some differences between where the Heisman is versus the Walter Camp Player of the Year. They'll try to split them up, or it just happens, as they say. But, I have an issue with that. But, it's all a moot point if CJ Stroud doesn't go out and have a great game against Michigan. And again, we are going to have plenty of conversation on the game throughout the week. I'll have a show that'll be dropping on Friday talking specifically and almost exclusively about the game. So don't feel that I'm missing the point, not talking about it. It's Tuesday. Give me a couple days. We'll build up to it. It'll be a nice post-Thanksgiving dinner treat. I might even drop it Thursday evening. Maybe I'll drop it Thursday evening just so people, if you don't like the night game in the NFL, I think the Egg Bowl's on too, so you can see Matt Corral. But if you don't like that, you can go in and listen to the show. But to be continued. We got to see Kyle McCord in the Michigan State game. 4 of 8, 17 yards, a pretty bad interception. They certainly tried to get him to throw a touchdown. That touchdown ended up going to Master Teague on the ground. I understand about calling off the dogs, and generally when you call off the dogs, you bring in the 2s, you bring in the 3s. But wouldn't there be a benefit at some point of letting the 2s at least run the 1s playbook? How are you getting a guy ready for that type of situation if you don't let him throw? And, Kevin, he threw 8 times. It certainly was not it wasn't the most complex playbook that they put out there. And it's not because Kyle McCord doesn't know the playbook. Kyle McCord knows the playbook. Kyle McCord started against Akron. They weren't going to roll him out there with a playbook that was consisting of the back of a cocktail napkin. He knows the playbook. Now I understand, and I'm not going to call out any of the backup wide receivers because that's not fair to them. It's not fair to sit there and say, well, you just can't go out and run that offense. But I'm not advocating to bring a 2 or a 3 in at quarterback and throw them in a high leverage situation in the 3rd series of the game and say, now go, here we go, let's see what you can do, show us. I'm not advocating for that, but I am advocating for allowing these guys the opportunity to maybe run more of an offense because, and this isn't even having anything to do with Quinn Ewers, who came in to hand the ball off, and by golly, those were the finest handoffs I've ever seen in my life. Well, at least that's what I've heard from some people, but I digress there. I just think it's important to have those types of situations. God willing, Ohio State will have a whole 4th quarter against that team up north to kind of do whatever it wants. We'll see. I've been talking about my prediction with people. I don't generally write that till Wednesday, so I've got a day. I've got a couple scores in mind, but I need to really kind of look at things. I was right on with Ohio State's score. I was only off by 4. I said 52. They scored 56. Ooh, I was off on Michigan State's score. I said 31, and they scored 7. What about the Ohio State defense? They did themselves a job. Now, I'm going to be the one to say right off the bat, no Jalen Nailor, so they lost their number 2 receiver. I don't know about you, but I don't think Kenneth Walker was right. He had a couple of nice runs, but when you roll your ankle and you're dealing with an ankle injury, you could look good for a couple plays, and then you could just do something to just re-aggravate it, and then you're done. Now, on the flip side, it could have been a case of this game, we blinked and all of a sudden it was 28-0. Let's not get this guy hurt worse or whatever. I mean, he wasn't the leading rusher. I'm looking here at the book. I mean, he had 6 carries. Jordan Simmons had 7 carries. Elijah Collins had 3 carries. They only ran it 21 times. A couple of runs that Walker had, he had some nice ones. I mean, he also got stopped behind the line. Ohio State limited what Jaden Reed was able to do. Jaden Reed had 10 targets. He only had 2 receptions. He only had 2 receptions in the game. I remember going back and watching it on TV, and I saw at a point where it looked like he was a little uncomfortable. I don't know if he got pulled because he got hurt or if he got pulled because this game just really was not going to come around. So they don't start with Jalen Naylor. You knock out Kenneth Walker potentially in terms of just, hey, we're just not going to do this. Maybe that was the situation with Jaden Reed. But you can't take away from Ohio State just the fact that they came out there and played with their hair on fire. And they only got home twice on sacks. Haskell Garrett was credited with 1, and Tyleik Williams was credited with 1. But how about 11 PBUs? Zach Harrison, Tyreek Smith, both knocking down several passes. They just made Peyton Thorne's life miserable out there. I think it's 9 tackles for loss. They were just all over the place. And Ohio State was credited with a forced fumble and a recovery, but did they get kind of hosed on a call where, once again, a catch was not a catch. And Denzel Burke knocked the ball loose from the Michigan State receiver, picked up immediately by Bryson Shaw. They go to review. It was ruled a catch and down on the field. Bill LeMonnier, who's the ABC, the announcer, the former Big Ten official, who's like the Gene Steratore for ABC, ESPN. He's like, oh yeah, this is gonna get overturned, and then they call incomplete. And then of course, he's got to protect his guys. Well, I mean, I guess I can understand what they were looking at, but it was close. Translation: well, I don't know what the hell these guys were looking at. I don't have a fix for replay. I don't know how to fix it completely. But I don't know if putting retired officials in the replay booth is the right decision. Why don't you sit there why don't you just train replay officials? Why don't you have people that you put in the pipeline and you train them as replay officials? And they can be in their 40s or in their 50s. And this isn't an age thing. This isn't saying, oh, well, if you're old, you can't see. I mean, I'm wearing glasses and they're a step down from Coke bottles. I can't see. I need to get LASIK or new eyes or something. I don't know. But I'm not a replay official. It's not my job. But I think you can sit there and within a year or 2 fast track a couple of individuals to understand the rules, to understand how this all works, and do it properly. Now, what I don't want is this to go to like Birmingham, like in the SEC or Atlanta or wherever replay center is, because it reeks too much of impropriety of, just get the commissioner on the hotline. How do we want this game to turn out? There's always going to be that concern. Everybody thinks that the officials hate them. Everybody thinks in baseball that the umpires are squeezing their strike zone or whatever. I get it. It's what makes sports beautiful and frustrating all at the same time. But there's got to be a better situation for replay. I think they need to kind of review what gets replayed, what's replay eligible, and I think that they need to have fresh eyes because I'm not convinced that things are getting called correctly. But I digress. What should we make out of Michigan's 59-18 win over Maryland? I'm going to say nothing. Nothing, because Maryland was already kind of drawing dead. And I understand Maryland needs a win to get bowl eligible. So they were plenty motivated. But Michigan sat there, and before Michigan had to worry about really getting out there for its final sets of warm-ups, Michigan already knew that Ohio State had completely bludgeoned Michigan State to death. So 59 points for Michigan, I think, was an answer to say, hey, we're here too. We're here too. We can put up points. Only 24 came in the first half. 28 came in the third. And then we also saw Michigan, for some unbeknownst reason to me, do a fake on a kickoff return where the one player chucked it across the field to the other player and he ran it in. I mean, yes, okay, we wanted to put it on tape, so Ohio State had to prepare for it. You know what's better than doing that? Not putting it on tape and executing it. I don't know. Ohio State probably is not going to give Michigan a lot of opportunities to return it. They're probably going to kick it deep, but if you're an Ohio State fan, you want to sit there and see Ohio State kicking off a lot after touchdowns. So I'm kind of going through the numbers right now. Blake Corum at running back did not play again. Donovan Edwards came off of injury. He had a big game, 170 yards receiving, 134 after the catch, a touchdown. He had a 77-yarder. Cade McNamara, 21 of 28, 259, a couple of scores. Hassan Haskins, 20 carries, 78 yards, a couple scores. McCarthy ran one in. But, if we're being honest, Maryland is Maryland. And even if Maryland comes out and tries to play its, rear end off, that's just okay. Maryland can't run the ball. There was the third team that Michigan has played in a row that have been in the bottom 30 nationally in terms of rushing offense. Indiana's 109th, Penn State's 116th, Maryland's 110th. So you have that type of situation going on. I don't know. I just think that there are a lot of people who are looking at Michigan as like, well, they just scored 59 points. This game is highly in jeopardy. Look, I went to school during the John Cooper years. I never saw Ohio State beat Michigan as an undergrad at Ohio State. I saw a tie. I was sitting in, I think it was 7A. I saw a tie. We didn't know what to think after that game. Didn't know if we were supposed to be happy, angry. So I was a little hungover, I'll tell you that. After Kegs and Eggs, Papa Joe's, those were the days. But, never saw a win. So I understand where a lot of people are coming from. Oh, there have been so many times that Michigan has done this and that. Yes. How many of those have happened in the 2000s? And we're in 2021 right now. Ohio State certainly motivated. Ohio State fans certainly believe that Michigan ducked them. I'm not going to quite go there. I mean, if you don't have enough players to play, you don't have enough players to play. Never going to really know the numbers of what they had, what they didn't have. Certainly sound like they had no quarterbacks. That probably would have been an issue. Wouldn't have been like Ohio State and Oklahoma State in the Alamo Bowl where you could just put Ted Ginn in and let him run the offense. So, Ohio State's going to be motivated. Ohio State's going to be motivated. Cade McNamara, God bless you, son. I'm still waiting to see where you're dramatically better than John O'Korn, Wilton Spate, Shea Patterson. Maybe I'll feel differently in a couple days when we get around to doing the other show. As of now, as of the time that I'm talking to you, as of the time you're hearing this, I'm not feeling it. So I'm going to label that Maryland-Michigan game as fool's gold, and we'll wait and see. Let's jump to Oregon. And Oregon finally saw its luck run out to Utah, 38-7, in a game that wasn't 31 points close. It was much wider in terms of what the margin was from what I saw. Utah couldn't do any wrong. Utah returned a kickoff with 10 seconds left in the game, or left in the half. Kyle Whittingham takes his timeouts, forces Oregon to kick it off, or punt. I'm sorry, it's a punt. And a guy that's, 5'8", 140 pounds, dripping wet. I know he's a little bigger than that, but you know what I'm saying. Probably gets confused with the equipment manager some points. Houses it. 28-0 at that point. Blouses, game over. Bye, Felicia, at that point. I am not convinced. I mean, if Oregon makes the Pac-12 championship game again, makes the Pac-12 championship game, have to play Utah again. And Utah's going to just do the same thing to them. But I mean, Oregon has to get past Oregon State in that rivalry game, the game formerly known as the Civil War. But, you know, we can't call games these things anymore. So I don't know what they call it. I don't care. But, so they drop off. And then I move right into the upcoming college football playoff ranking reveal later today. If you're listening to this show on Tuesday. If you're listening to it after Tuesday, you'll be like, what the hell are you talking about? They're already out. So we know number 3 is going to fall out because that's Oregon. And now Oregon is sitting with 2 losses. Where does Ohio State end up? Does Ohio State move up to 2? The AP moved Ohio State up to 2. Does Ohio State move up to 3? Does the committee get crazy and move Cincinnati over Ohio State? Cincinnati was very impressive in its game over, SMU? But with that being said, once again, Cincinnati is not playing Power 5 teams. It's playing Group of 5 teams. So I don't think you could move them up. So I think we could see Ohio State. I'm thinking 2. I'm thinking 2 because Alabama struggled against Arkansas. And yes, I know. Arkansas was ranked 21 in the polls and probably will not fall out of the polls because SEC. But it was a game where, I don't know, there were some interesting calls from the Zebras. Alabama won the game. I mean, you can debate that one Jamison Williams touchdown where they were going right to left on the television screen, and it was kind of a diving out the back of the end zone, and it took a real long time for the officials to call a touchdown. But I could also point out, there was a very obvious rush or touchdown that Arkansas scored that they somehow overturned, and then they knocked it in from one football out, and then they still had to review it. It just felt odd. But again, all of that talk aside, are you going to leave Alabama up there for, yes, they won a top 25 game. Ohio State won a top 10 game by 49 points. And it could have been by 70 points. I don't know. It'll be really interesting at that point because here's the thing. You're not going to have a situation where Georgia is 1 and Alabama is 4, or Alabama is 1 and Georgia is 4, because they're not going to set up a rematch just a couple weeks later after they play in Atlanta. Just put that in pen. If both SEC teams make it, they're going to make sure that they're in different games. They're not going to put them together. So if you move Alabama down to 3 versus keeping them at 2, it doesn't really matter that much. I mean, they're going to sort some things out on the field. If Georgia wins, that gives Alabama its second loss. Then the debate starts, and I think it depends on where everything else stands. If the SEC gets 2 teams in there, there's not a doubt in my mind that Georgia and Alabama are 2 of the 4 best teams out there. But wins and losses do matter. I'm not going to be the one banging the drum. Oh, head-to-head matters. Yes, I get it. But that's not supposed to be your first determining factor. I mean, that's in the equation, but it's not your first thing. Sorry, Booger. But that's not the first thing on there. Read the rules. Read the charter. But, I don't know. If Ohio State wins, beats Michigan by 1, beats Wisconsin, likely in the Big Ten championship game, by 1, it doesn't matter. Ohio State should be 2 at that point. I don't think, even if Georgia loses, I don't know how much they get punished unless they lose by like 11 million points. And even with that, I don't see them dropping below 4. And then you could see a situation. I don't know. I need to almost draw out a flow chart and see what this all looks like and what it all sounds like, because I don't know where the committee is, and I don't think anybody does. I don't think the committee knows who the committee is. Oh, we scrap it all. We scrap it all each week and we start fresh. Okay. Sure you do. And I'm sure that the local McDonald's throws away the old coffee and just doesn't pour some fresh coffee on top of it and mix it together. I love you, McDonald's, but your coffee's bad. It, it is. Um, so the goalposts move from week to week. It always feels like the goalposts do have an SEC medallion on them, though. So I don't know. We'll see. And, my buddies over at College Football Nerds, the CFB Nerds, check them out. I had Josh on last week. They pointed out, as I made, I post on Twitter as I'm watching games. I have a little fun with that. They pointed out about Iowa being 2 and Penn State being 4 at some week. That's by the human voters. That wasn't by the committee. The committee are supposed to be the best and brightest. They're supposed to be this room who determines this. They're not the writer for the, Salt Lake City penny saver. These are supposed to be, they're getting paid to go down to Grapevine, Texas, and be sequestered to a ballroom and probably getting fantastic dinners and everything else. There's a little bit of a difference between the writers or some mid-level person in a football program filling in the coaches' votes. The AP and the coaches' votes are all well and good. It gives us something to talk about. It gives us something to write about. But it's still a little bit different than what the College Football Playoff Committee comes out. And then they send out poor Gary Barta, who has to defend what's out there. And I will agree with what Josh said. And I'm not railing on my nerd friends. They are great. I really like them. But I'm going to sit there and say something that Josh said. Gary Barta doesn't, and whoever's in that role. It's not just a Gary Barta thing. They're not the most eloquent person in defending it. And it's not that they're ineloquent people. These people have risen to heights in their careers. So they're not dunderheads, but they're just not necessarily in a situation to where they can defend well these decisions they make. And whether or not it's just, oh, well, this all kind of came together and I'm not sure what to make of it, or maybe they see the own absurdity of what it is they're trying to defend. But, with Alabama being 2 for a long time, it may be difficult to sit there and push them down until these two teams play, and we may keep getting it'll sort itself out on the field in Atlanta. And we'll see. Again, it's all an exercise in futility if Ohio State doesn't win its next 2. I mean, there will be 4 teams in the college football playoff. It will go on. They will crown a champion in Indianapolis. But I know that the people that are watching this show largely care about Ohio State, so we're looking at this from an Ohio State standpoint. So win the games, let everything else kind of sort out. I know I've said win by 1 and it's fine. Win by 21. How about that? Win by 21. Go on this stretch, beat then number 7 Michigan State. We're going to probably look at Michigan being they were 6 last week. Could they move up to 5 at minimum with Oregon falling out? So a top 5 win. That would be great. Wisconsin, as of last week, was 15. So, that certainly would be a top 15 win, provided Wisconsin doesn't somehow blow it this week. I think it's going to be an impressive resume, as so many people out there have been like, up until Michigan State, Ohio State hadn't beat a ranked team. Well, teams had been ranked when Ohio State played them, and then they kind of fell off the table. 7-4 Penn State certainly didn't help the cause. I was glad to see Michigan State only fall to like the 12-13 range in the human polls. We'll see what the committee does. But that's where, and I'm going to end on this point because we're going to be talking to you here very soon for our live watch of the rankings and discussion from that. But see what happens in the last 5 picks, the last 5 spots of the top 25. That's where you can see where the committee's thinking. Does Arkansas fall out of the top 25? What happens with teams like Mississippi State? What happens in situations like that? Who are they protecting? Who are they protecting by keeping wins as top 25 wins for as long as possible? There's got to be a better way to do this. There really does. I don't know what it is yet. But it's what makes it fun. And here's the reality: we could take the college football playoff to 8. People are going to gripe about who's 9. We could take it up to 12, and people are going to gripe about who's 13. People are going to gripe about where games are played, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's not going to be a perfect system. This isn't college basketball to where you could just have like a jamboree and have, we're just going to play these games back to back. We're just going to sit there and do that. We're going to go and play up in the dome up in North Dakota and go with it. We're just going to do that. It's not how it works. Too many dollars in play. SEC is too strong. The alliance of three, the unwritten, unsigned, untalked about at this point alliance between the Pac-12, Big Ten, and ACC, they're punching above their weight class and trying to deal with the SEC. The SEC holds all the power right now. But I digress. We're about 35 minutes in, so I think that's about time to call it a show. As I said, we will be back here very soon on Tuesday. Again, if you're listening to this as we post it, join Tom Orr, Tony Gerdeman, and myself as we watch a college football playoff ranking reveal show. We'll be on the air for about an hour and a half. Plenty of other great content. Morning Scoop with Tom Orr and a guest. Buckeye Weekly Podcast with Tony and Tom. A lot of other great content. We're getting close to the early signing period for football for 2022. Keep it locked in there and so much more. So if you're getting this on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, not miss anything. Really means a lot to us. Helps us get this out to more people. If you're listening through Spreaker, Apple iTunes, any of the other things, be sure to subscribe to it as well. Check us out. Don't miss a show. Once again, I'm your host, Kevin Noon. Want to thank you for watching or listening, however you're taking this podcast in, and I'll talk to you again later this week.